If I don't review this last Spider-Verse figure that I own, I'm going to be disrupting a canon event. Being that we're all in a bit of a Spider-Verse craze with the recent release of Across the Spider-Verse, I figured I would tackle, finally, the only figure I have yet to review out of my collection on the channel. I've already covered Sentinel Peter B. Parker, Mayfix Miles Morales, and then of course most recently the at least half of the Across the Spider-Verse wave from Marvel Legends. So this time, going back to Sentinel, going back to one of the companies that frankly kind of surprised me, because you always figured that there'll be an awful lot of quality coming from Mayfix, from Figuarts, in terms of having that middle tier where things are a little bit pricier for their figures, but at least they match that quality. You have this company called Sentinel, and they come mostly from China, and I really didn't know too much about them until they tackled the Spider-Verse figures. And so with my brush with Peter B. Parker, I figured, yeah, I think I might have to actually get myself some more from this wave, and most especially from this line. And the next one that caught my eye, mainly because there was a Black Friday deal last year, was the Sentinel Peni Parker and SPDR, or as I like to call it, the Spider-Bot. And here's the thing, though I really loved Peter B. Parker, not only the figure itself, but all the accessories it came with, the value, the quality that was definitely there, there's something a little bit more contrasting with Peni Parker and the Spider-Bot here, because let's get the very obvious out of the way, moving the Spider-Bot out of the way and tackling Peni herself first. You can clearly tell that, yeah, she is in fact just a little mini statue figurine. She's pretty much just a static pose right here, and it's built out of a pretty durable quality of plastic, and the paint apps as well as the actual detail for the uniform, the shoes, I even like the little spider symbols down there on her socks. They're actually pretty well made, but it is a little figurine, something that I kind of started to get the gist of when I started to see more promo shots, when I started to look at some of the imagery that was outside of the box, and frankly, it turned out to be correct. Nevertheless, she's still sparkling with an awful lot of that anime personality that she was able to retain from the film. You even have the nice little details and paint apps on the backpack, and again, the hair, and to me, what shines the most in terms of the paint apps and how well they were able to get them across is that face. Those little anime details along with the pose really are striking. The only downside though is that her being a little figurine makes it very difficult to have her stand on her own, which is why Sentinel themselves threw in this base. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is necessarily the most effective base because it's just this little circular piece of plastic with the rod coming out of it, and it doesn't really stay in place. It's almost like it's using gravity to have her be at an angle to get her to stand this way, and I really don't want to futz with it too badly because getting her to stand via this base is actually a bit of a pain, especially since her feet, as you can kind of tell, are a little askew, and so they're never truly flat down on the surface, and therefore getting her to actually be working with the base is just a chore in and of itself. So even though she does a good job of having that presentation value, especially when she's side by side with Spider-Bot, is nailed, getting her to actually stand up on her own is a hassle. So she's definitely not necessarily the reason for why you get this set. The main reason is of course going to be Spider-Bot itself. And you can see that representation and actual one-to-one scale and look of the character itself is done really well by Sentinel once more. Much like Peter B. Parker, you can tell that they pretty much just took whatever renders, whatever kind of reference material that Sony and everybody that worked on the film were able to send on over to Sentinel and replicate it fairly well. Granted, you're not necessarily spoiled for choice because this is arguably, I think, the best looking Spider-Bot figure that there is out there. I have yet to come across a different manufacturer that has had the confidence to tackle Spider-Bot in figure format. I mean, I legitimately cannot remember if even Marvel Legends, let alone Figuarts or any other company, actually managed to make a Spider-Bot figure. So you don't necessarily have a variety of options, but at least the option that you're dealt with here in the form of Sentinel's outing actually looks like the character. You have an awful lot of great sculpt work happening here in the middle torso with my favorite part in terms of detail having to be this little bit of yellow lettering here on the side that has all this neat little serial numbers and little programming codes and things like that that's very much speak to the character, along with the little spider symbol there in the middle. And then of course the clash of red and blue that works very well. It's very angular, very cyberpunkish, cybernetic, but it looks in favor of the character with an awful lot of the majority of the blue happening on this side and red on the other side. But again, having an awful lot of those anime robot kind of influences happening alongside the arms, the legs, the clawed up hands, the clawed up feet. Everything just looks very quintessential of that Spider-Bot. And of course, it all translates very well to the dome head here with the two eyes painted on. So overall, it has a definitive shelf presence that definitely looks the character, but you can kind of feel that I'm having a difficult time handling the figure, and that's because even though the middle portion of the body here is built very, very solid and actually feels quality in hand, can't really say the same for the rest of the limbs. There's something kind of hollow and empty feeling about the legs that don't really scream Sentinel quality. I would even argue that Peter B. Parker felt better built than that of Sentinel Spider-Bot, and that's considering that he's supposed to be a robot, so he's supposed to have a little bit of weight to him. So having the majority of the weight dispersed on the torso here, even if it's still faithful to design, you gotta bring a little bit of extra support to the legs, because when you're dealing with chicken feet looking things like this, you're gonna be dealing with an awful lot of top heaviness. So you can see right here that even upon simply placing it on the surface, you're going to have to maneuver an awful lot of the ankles and the legs to get it in a pose where he's fairly balanced and he's going to be able to stand on his own. Now, it's not the most difficult thing because of the way that those legs and feet are sculpted. It's not the most challenging thing, but it's one of those figures where posing him and getting him to stand is not necessarily the trouble. It's maintaining that, because one simple little move and you can see that he's already kind of moving. So this is one of those easy figures where if he's up on a shelf, you best probably put it furthest in the back, where if he's going to fall, he's going to fall up against the wall. Otherwise, you could turn to the articulation to get him in a much more flatline pose so that not so much of the top heaviness is happening here on the upper side of the body. But here's where things get a little contesting, because with much more humanoid characters like Peter B. Parker, and I would imagine, even though I don't own the figures, I could very easily imagine characters like Gwen and Miles to have articulation that favors the body, that favors the actual flexibility of them being spider people. Spider-Bot, even though is supposed to be a spider character, he is still, however, a robot. Very much a Japanese anime robot. And I'm gonna kind of propose a juxtaposition here, and I'm gonna pretty much contradict myself a little bit and confess to that, because I'm sorry, it just happens to be the case. His articulation is rather robotic, and I get it. I absolutely get it. He's supposed to be a robot. He's supposed to be very angular and very, have all these hard edges all over the place. But sometimes that works to the detriment of his posability. Here's what I mean. You can pretty much forget about any kind of head or torso articulation. This is all one giant piece, obviously, so that's not going to happen. We then get to the limbs, where you have pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4 of these very girthy ball joints up on the shoulders and top legs, and then some smaller joints that are pretty much identical to that of the bigger ones, just in a smaller proportion on the elbows and knees. That really about does it for the majority of the articulation that's going to help you in posing. When it comes to those top arms, you have these ball joints that really have almost just 3 general points of actual movement. You have the hinges in the middle that are going to allow the arm to be able to move outwards and inwards and pretty much extend horizontally. It's only here in the point of connection where those pegs go into the body that are able to then fully rotate vertically 360. And then technically you can also rotate it at the other end, because by default that's just how those joints are built. And the same is going to repeat for pretty much not only the other arm but also the top leg. You're going to be able to move the leg forwards and backwards, as you can see right about right there, and extend it towards the side because of the way that that overall joint is designed. And like I said, you could kind of cheat a little bit because you have these points of connections on either side of the ball joint, so you're able to swivel there in place and then a little bit more towards where this triangular piece really is. But there's moments where you really need to watch that joint, because one false move that doesn't move in that area that you want that joint to do. It's difficult to explain, but once you feel it in your hand, you'll understand what I mean, where it feels like it's going to go in a direction, but no, you got to cheat. You got to make sure that you're bending at the hinge. Otherwise, if you bend in this direction, that's not like that you would expect your typical ball joint to be, it's not going to do it, and you risk breaking that translucent blue ball joint. Same thing goes for both the elbows and the knees, and I would probably say I would emphasize that caution even greater with those joints because of how much smaller they are and how much more delicate they're going to be. You can rotate the forearm about that angle horizontally or vertically, depending on where you're actually placed the upper arm, 360 degrees, and then at the hinge, you're able to bend inwards and outwards like so. But in order to kind of get in different directions, say for example, you want the arm to be like this, sure, you can have it like this, but then it's only going to pivot inwards and outwards like that. So you just got to be at the mercy of where those blue translucent joints are going to be and positioned. Same thing for the knees. You can kind of bend it inwards and make sure to have this black piece facing forward. That's pretty much your shin. So bending the knee is about that far up. It's actually pretty generous in that manner. And then extending towards the front, you can technically kind of do it. And rotation does happen, again, at the 2 points of connections at the top and bottom. But that's really about it. So you just need to know exactly where you can bend. Otherwise, if you bend it in a weird direction, you're going to start to feel that resistance and potentially break the figure and damage it. So do be careful. Now, as far as your actual feet and hands, well, the chicken feet are technically all one piece, so there's no form of individual toe articulation, but you can rotate them 360 degrees up on the top part of that ball joint and flex them downwards and forwards, and you can technically incline them inwards and outwards, but that's only because of the way that they're connected via the rod inside that then fits into the foot. Otherwise, again, do be careful because they're very easy to come off, as you can see right there. The hands, on the other hand, are a little bit more generous. Not only can you rotate them in place 360 degrees via this flat joint, but unlike the feet, each individual digit, I guess you could call it, is articulated. So you can move the smaller one inwards and outwards and the two separate from each other. So again, it's a little difficult to really illustrate exactly where I'm coming from in terms of my argument of why the articulation is kind of cool and kind of not at the same time. It's robotic and rigid and it fits the character, while at the same time it never really feels all that great to pose it. I always fall back to this very neutral stance because in order to put him in a dynamic pose, I can do it, but there's an awful lot of hindrances in that journey to get to that pose that just end up kind of frustrating me. But Sentinel made sure to be able to match the price point for some hidden features that make sense for the character of the Spider-Bot. Unlike Peter B. Parker or even Penny down here, he has some hidden features, one of which is pretty damn cool, and it makes sense for the character to not bypass this, while the other just feels like an afterthought. Spider-Bot came with 3 of these chip batteries, and if you install them in the back here where you have this separate panel that's a little difficult to get to because you do have to kind of nudge your nail in there, so if you don't have any nails that might be a bit of a problem. But once you remove this panel, mine are thankfully a little much more grown out than usual, so I'm able to remove the panel, and upon removing yet another panel here that has to be removed via a screwdriver, you're able to fit in those chip batteries, reinstall the panel, pop everything back in, flip the on and off switch at the top to on, and yes, he comes with LED lighting, not only illuminating the spider symbol here on the front, but also the eyes up on the dome head, which is a nice little touch. Speaking of that dome head, it's not the only one he actually came with. Using your non-existing nail once more, you can actually dig into this little crevice here at the top and remove the, I guess you could call it the faceplate, to reveal that underneath you have the LED lights that illuminate that feature. And on the side, Sentinel went ahead and threw in this separate faceplate with the smiley face and the little anime eyes. That is incredibly cute and a nice little touch. However, you may have noticed that unlike the very edgy robotic eyes that he had before, this specific faceplate is angled in a way where the eyes and the overall face is much higher than the original eyes that he came with. Why is that? Well, that's where we get into another feature that really feels kind of tacked on by Sentinel, because I've already seen Spider-Verse, the first movie, I want to say about 4, maybe 5 times, and I do not remember Spider-Bot ever having this feature or this mode, so to speak. But according to the instruction booklet that came with the figure, which is nicely decked out and very well illustrated, there's a hidden kind of friendly mode that is featured within Spider-Bot here. And in order to do it, we actually have to turn to those points of connections that I was mentioning. There's a reason for why you're able to move the joints the way that you can at those ends of those ball joints, because you can technically remove all the limbs. You can literally disassemble Spider-Bot completely, and that's because he's supposed to be transformed into this secondary mode. In order to do so, you have to pretty much take the arms completely apart and open the hands to resemble feet, like so. Plug the arms into the back, like so. Plug the legs into where the arms go, pretty much mutilating the entirety of Spider-Bot here. And that's pretty much the gist of it. Now, what about these extra pieces? They're technically, according to those dioramas up on the instruction booklet, I don't understand it. But basically, you're supposed to put him here at the top. It's the reason for why there's these holes here on the top, so you're supposed to fit the joints inside there. Make sure that this part right here is facing forward, and this part is towards the back. That's, again, according to those images up on the instruction booklet. That's how they're supposed to be placed. And this is pretty much what? His alternate mode? I don't even remember what it was called, but again, I personally do not remember Spider-Bot ever being in this position, and quite frankly, it's frightening. I'm sorry, this, Miguel was saying you're the anomaly. This is the anomaly. Yeah, no thank you. Let's go ahead and revert Spider-Bot back to his original position. Ah, yes. Much, much better. Sure, he's not able to stand as well as that alternate mode because he technically was on all fours and much flatter on the surface, but I'll take this neutral, much more relaxed, and much less horrifying pose any day. Plus, even though he's a bit top heavy and a little difficult to stand on his own, Sentinel did in fact throw in this base with the articulated arm to help. Technically, there's nothing else to really help poor little Penny right here except for maybe this sticker sheet, or at least what I thought was the sticker sheet, but it turned out to be these. They're technically still stickers, but they have to be used with lukewarm water, so you have to dip them in water, place them on Spider-Bot. This whole process of drying them out, I don't know, it's a little bit too much for my taste, so I'm just gonna leave them on the sheet. But I do like the inclusion of not only duplicates, but also the Spider-Man name tags here towards the bottom, so it's cool that they have a variety of them, or at least an assortment of them, that you can use not only on Spider-Bot, but you can technically also use on the rest of the Sentinel figures, such as Gwen, Miles, and Peter, and actually adorn them with the name tag. So that's a nice little touch. Again, just the overall process of getting them applied is just a little bit too much for me, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just leave them on the sticker sheet as they are. With that said, you can see that, yeah, this Spider-Bot here is a bit of a problematic set when it comes to Sentinel's second outing of their Spider-Verse figures that I own. Again, Miles and Gwen are still a little bit outstanding because I haven't had a chance to pick them up, and they are going for a bit of a pretty penny. Parker, see what I did there? Right now in the aftermarket, so I have yet to actually pull the trigger on them, but having owned Peter B. Parker and being impressed with that, I was just slightly disappointed with how much there was in terms of limitations on the articulation or the compromises that plague Spider-Bot, which is why this is definitely a pickup if you're going for a complete assortment of the Sentinel Spider-Verse wave, but do so at a discount, which is technically how I got this set, was at a Black Friday sale that Sideshow Collectibles was having. And frankly, for the price that I paid, it's not a bad pickup, but there's an awful lot of little caveats and asterisks happening with the figure that I think that if there was one little sacrifice from the wave that you need to make, it will probably be this set, and I will give the Sentinel, Peni Parker, and Spider-Bot set a 7 out of 10. Not a bad addition to the collection, and still completes the overall image of having the team, especially once I get around to getting Miles, Gwen, and then the subsequent Noir Spider-Man that Sentinel is currently working on right now, even though I kind of feel like it's a little late for that. We already have the sequel. Probably by the time it comes out, Beyond the Spider-Verse is probably going to be here. But if that noir is a little closer to the quality of Peter P. Parker and not the Spider-Bot here, I think we're in good hands. Still, if you guys are also trying to complete your overall Sentinel Spider-Verse wave just like I am, and you guys want to pick this guy up, there are going to be affiliate links in the description that you guys can use to help out the channel and get yours in the process. Otherwise, if you already own this figure, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about it. Do you like it, not like it, give or take? What are your guys' rating for the figure? Do you think that Sentinel could give Mafex and Figuarts a run for their money as far as competition? Or do you think that they're still kind of in their own kind of territory or demographic as far as what they cater to? Let me know your guys' insights down below. And as always, thank you guys for watching and stay humble. I'll see you later.